Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
It's exactly 4 minutes past the top of the hour, which is 9 a.m. this lovely, cold Wednesday morning. I'm Robert Chirabo Newington, in case you've just joined, and welcome to Good Morning Uganda Extra, which is an extension of Good Morning Uganda. But I cannot forget to remind you that this show starts at exactly 6:30. Every morning, 6:30, Good Morning Uganda is live on your screen. We have those light moments, we spice up your moment, we give you some laughter here and there, some jokes, but most importantly, it's a very informative waking up, because we look at what is happening locally and also internationally, plus some discussions and analyzing some events that are happening in our country. Now, it is this extension of Extra, and I have another interesting topic, I must say, because today we are going to see the launch of the pecking order report. Now, one would ask themselves, pecking order report? Don't ask yourself so much. The guest I have, who comes from the World Animal Protection Organization, World, not wild this time, but World Animal Protection, Victor Yamo is with me, who happens to be the farming campaign manager. You're most welcome to Uganda. You're most welcome, Victor.
Thank you, Robert.
How is Kenya?
Kenya is fine. Yep. Yeah.
And now let's begin by taking the bull by its horn.
Okay.
When we talk about, first there are two words here, pecking and order.
Yeah.
Let's break these two and see how they merge to make the report that's being launched today.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I'm sure a lot of Ugandans, like Kenyans, eat chicken. So pecking comes from chicken. What chickens usually do, they peck as they look for their food. So you're just saying, you're looking at how we then order is, of course, sequence. So we are ranking food companies based on how they treat or manage chicken welfare. Which is to say, animal welfare is some of the things that are important, and how we then manage them as food companies determines outcomes, has outcomes on the health of our customers. It also has outcomes on the well-being of the animal, which is also critical, because a poorly managed animal whose welfare is not catered for does not produce well. Production is not good enough, but they also do not produce good quality products. Hence the reason why, as an organization, we want to look at how food companies in Africa and globally are managing the welfare of birds, chickens to be precise.
Well, that will bring us if they have rights or not, because in some African countries, what right do chicken have?
Yeah.
But this also takes me to understand, what is this whole thing, World Animal Protection? Is it an ungovernmental? Is it an, you know, who are you and what is your mandate?
Okay.
And even why?
Thank you, Robert. Again, good question. World Animal Protection is a global organization that looks at the welfare of animals, predominantly animals in farming systems, and then animals in wildlife. In fact, my colleague who heads the wildlife docket actually is a Ugandan. Yeah. And a long time ago, I'm sure there was something called Uganda Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. That is where we came from. We were a long time ago known as World Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, WISPR. But in 2014, we rebranded and became World Animal Protection with the mandate to champion the welfare of animals globally. Yeah? And in terms of welfare, and I think you are right at certain points, there was that question, do chickens have rights, and are those rights important? That's what we want. That's where we start. We start by saying animals have what we call fundamental freedoms. As good animal welfare practitioners, we do not call them rights, because that's a bit extreme. We call them fundamental freedoms. And these freedoms are important not only to the animal, but also to humanity.
Let's begin with how important they are to the animal per se.
Let me mention them so that we then understand them. The first one is freedom from hunger and thirst, which is to say the animal must be fed and also given good quality water. It is important to a farm animal to be fed well, because if you don't feed it well, it cannot produce. If you don't give it enough quality water, it cannot produce again. So the feed must be feed that meets the nutritional requirement of the animal at that stage of production. The way you feed a day-old chick is not the way you feed a laying hens. The way you feed a heifer is not the way you feed a milking cow. They have different nutritional requirements, and that is important for the animal to be able to grow. But it's also important to us, because if you feed the animal with wrong products, and I'll give you a good example, and maybe I'll ask you a question. In Uganda, what happens if grain goes off?
If grain?
Grain, maize. If you store maize and it starts rotting, what do you do with the maize?
Throw it away.
You throw it away. Some people feed it to the animals.
But many.
Yeah.
Because the guy was what do I? But many.
Yeah.
Well, if it's going bad, you give it to. If you have pigs, that is now second. If you have chicken, you throw it. They'll eat it and.
Exactly, and you see that's why I've asked the question, because that's exactly what East Africans does. Same question in Tanzania and or Kenya will give you the same answer. So essentially, that's one of the problems. The reason why you're throwing that maize away is because it has mycotoxins. Some fungus has grown of it that brings mycotoxin. If the animal consumes that maize with mycotoxin, the first problem the animal has, it ends up with a depressed immune. The mycotoxins depress immune systems. So the animal is prone to disease, which then brings a problem in the production system. But the second thing that we forget is that that animal concentrates whatever you give it. If you give it good quality feed, that's what is coming out as milk or eggs. So if you give it maize with mycotoxins, that mycotoxins will come out in milk, meat, or eggs that lead to other human disease problems. That's why animal welfare then is important to the animal, but also important to the human subjects. So that we just finish. The second freedom is freedom from discomfort, which is to say the animal must be in a comfortable environment. If it's a chicken house, is it well ventilated? Does it have space, enough wood shaving so that the animal has capacity to rest? If that's not done, if it's not well ventilated, for instance, you end up with respiratory conditions, which then means the animal must be treated, which then leads to antibiotic residues being found in milk and meat and whichever animal was treated. So that's the second one. The third one is freedom from pain, injury, and disease. And we say an animal which is undergoing painful situations ends up with stress and reduces adrenaline that spoils the quality of the product. But when you're stressed, you're also not able to produce well. And I'll give you a good example. I've been to Uganda severally, and I'm your neighbor. I come from a neighboring constituency called Busia, so half of my village could be in Uganda. Yeah. So one of the things that you realize is that I see people transporting animals in Uganda with their tails tied up on top of the road.
Yes.
That animal is getting a lot of pain. The quality of the product, because of adrenaline and the pain, when you slaughter that animal, you don't end up with good quality products, which means the farmer loses. And because of injury, when you're transporting it, you end up with places which have bacteria can get into, which then contaminates the meat, which means the consumer is getting a poor quality product. And those are the important things around animals. In fact, the freedom is about pain, injury, and disease. If you've looked at disease processes recently, 70% of human diseases are actually coming from animals, what we call zoonotic diseases. So if you don't manage the animal well and you end up with diseases, that disease will most likely come through milk and meat into your food chain. That then leads to higher costs of managing human subjects when they get ill. So we say that it's cheaper and more prudent to manage animals well, so that the diseases, the zoonotic diseases that move to humans, are then managed at that level. It's cheaper, and the cost of managing them is slightly less. And those are some of the things we are talking about, and that's why as an organization, we are then looking at animal welfare holistically, because animal welfare is not just about the animal, as we've seen, but it also has impacts on humanity, especially health aspects of humanity.
Well, I see this as an uphill task, more so in Africa here,
Yeah.
but good. wild animal protection, you're doing some work towards that direction. Because many Africans, animals, even some of the pets we have in our places, I am a dog breeder, I like dogs so much, but you find that people's perspective of dogs, if you tell someone I have to walk this dog regularly for it to exercise, or if someone finds you moving the dog, they'll look at you and say, but is this man lacking what to do?
Yeah, true.
Man of his stature, moving with a dog, and some don't understand. When you tell them, this kennel you've built is too small, I mean, this thing must have space, then they'll look at you and say, but why would I waste wood? This dog can't even fit in anything. Go to the animals you have, chicken, because now we're talking about pecking order. In our homes, these are things you just leave and they move if you're not in commercial.
Yeah, agreed.
What they eat, what they drink, Saudi. For you wait for it when a visitor comes and you say, we must eat.
Yeah.
The cow issue you've talked about. It is the order of the day in Uganda that when cows are going to the abattoir, because they're going to be killed anyway. So why mind about their rights and how you're taking them? You'll bring them wherever, even the person who has sold knows this is going for slaughtering. Yeah. Not for reproduction or anything. So it's going to be killed. Then if it's going to be killed, no matter how it gets there. I don't know if the time you've been around, you've seen how we move chicken, where the head is down and
on a motorbike.
On a motorbike and all that. So now this brings me to today's function.
Yeah.
When you're launching the world, the pecking order report, what is entailed in this? First.
Yeah. Okay, what it entails, and the examples you've given, Robert, are very nice, and those are the realities of what you are dealing with. But I think traditionally, Africans took very good care of their animals, because African lives are actually attached to animals. There's no compound or village you'll visit where there's no animals. So animals were traditionally very well taken care of.
And where I come from, there's even a saying, I'll say it in Uganda, musajja okumanya mwavu tenadde enkoko etakula mu luggya. Meaning that the definition of a very poor man, poverty-stricken, was that in his compound you didn't see at least a cock or a chicken, moving around, and so that's the attachment.
Yes.
But also it makes me to wonder, these hunters that used to go and use these dogs to chase and kill, then they give them bones and intestines. What love was that?
Well, I think what we need to be dealing with is that attitude and what has changed over the last couple of years. I think because of intensification and a lot of us coming into urban places like Kampala, the demand to produce animals has become very intense. And that's why we're moving to intensive farming systems where we are no longer allowing chickens to run around, but we're putting them in houses. When you put them in houses and you do not cater for their requirements or needs, the challenge then you have is that the animal underperforms. Yeah? And I think that's where we start talking about food safety and food security. If the animal is underperforming, you're not getting enough production to garner your food safety, food security issues. So that's the first thing that we need to look at. The second thing, the animal, when it's mistreated, and we've done research in Uganda and elsewhere, where you can see that because the animal was, if you hold that animal and tie its tail up there, the chicken is carried upside down, and you go and slaughter it, yeah? If it's injured, the requirements of the law, including Ugandan law for food safety requirements, is that you cannot have a broken limb passed as fit for human consumption. So what happens? You cut it or you downgrade. So what happens? The farmer loses. Because of poor welfare, the farmer is losing, so he's not making as much money as he should have made. That's problem one. Problem two, if you, because of that injury, that food is then not fit for consumption, and then you have issues around food safety. Because of intensification and poor environments that we keep, because again I've looked at several farms in this country and around this region, because of the poor environment that we are keeping animals in, farmers then have learned that if you introduce antibiotics, you can mask the disease. Yes. But they're forgetting that introduction of antibiotics into your production system means that you and I, the consumers, are eating products that have antibiotic residues or what we call antibiotic resistant genes, which then leads to resistance of that antibiotic in human populations. What we are forgetting is that that antibiotic is the same, the compound that is in that antibiotics that we use in animals is the same active ingredient that is used in humans. So since you've been consuming it from milk or meat over a period of time, it reaches a point when you cannot be treated because your body has been exposed and the organisms in your body are used to that drug. And that is what is leading to globally what we are calling antimicrobial resistance. And antimicrobial resistance is killing 1.27 million people every year. And if we do not do anything and change how we manage some of these things, antimicrobial resistance will be killing 10 million people every year by 2050. And that is why we are now saying we need to go back to how we manage animals, because management of animals has public health implications. Secondly, poor welfare has also implication on climate change, because if you're putting a lot of animals in one space, they produce a lot of greenhouse gases that has an impact. In fact, research now says about 15 to 30% of greenhouse gases are actually coming from production systems. Yeah? So that's one. But also intensive farming is leading to deforestation because we are clearing big lands to put animals into those spaces. And so that is what, as an organization, we are beginning to now ask ourselves, whom do we hold responsible? The consumer might not be aware of the issue, but the producer is. There are requirements. In this country, there's a Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, CAP 260, if I'm not wrong, or 220, if I remember well.
220.
220. In CAP 220, there are certain requirements. And I'm sure, Robert, since you're a dog breeder, you know that CAP 220 in Section 3 talks about if you don't underfeed an animal or starve an animal, that's an illegality. Why would you put that in our laws if it did help us?
And you know what happens? You see, we have laws.
That we are not
actually, we're not implementing them. I want to give you an example. The first time I heard of World Animal Protection, by then it was not yet World Animal Protection. What was the other name?
World Society for Prevention. WISPA.
WISPA.
Yeah, World Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals.
These people, your colleagues, came to a friend of mine who is a dog breeder. There's among the divisions that make Kampala, there's one called Much India. Now, we are told that some people, they have come, they're saying they're either going to take his dogs, that, you know, there is a law. And let me tell you what happened. Now, many of us were like, this guy is breeding dogs. How do you come to someone's home who is breeding these animals, yet there are thousands on the street that are being stoned by everybody who looks at them? They're eating on garbage. First go and pick those, then think of these ones in someone's home. You know? So, one, the law has not been popularized.
True.
Two, enforcement becomes a problem. Three, we don't appreciate animals as Ugandans to that level. Despite the fact that in African society, maybe we used to, because it was the only way of living, maybe. So this is where these laws are finding challenges. That you're not going to tell someone you're mistreating cows. When you tell that those that even sleep in crowds like stars of...
I agree with you, Robert, and that's why we, as an organization, we are saying the first point is what we are doing now, sensitize the masses to understand that these things are critical, and then connect that poor welfare to something that the Ugandan can understand. When I say poor quality products, you can identify with it. When we say you're having challenges with food security because of mistreating an animal, you can identify with that. When we say the farmer will not get as much money out of his business, if that is his business, because of a poor environment, these are things that we can actually do research, and we can actually show you economic terms. We've done in Kenya and Tanzania, we've done the evaluation of economic losses due to poor welfare. Poor transportation, poor welfare in the chicken house or in the pig house, and the impact it has in terms of the animal then gets sick, It's not, it has to be treated, which is an added cost to the producer and those things. Then I've even told you the public health implications because of poor welfare. Yeah, and that's why we, as an organization, we are saying, while we are educating the masses, we are also engaging government to start saying what the animal welfare laws that we have, like up to 20 here in Uganda, is it where it's supposed to be, or it's where it was in 1960s when it was done? Are there things we need to change to make the law better? Are there regulations we need to have in place so that when I'm transporting a cow, I know how to transport it? When I'm a dog breeder, what are the standards that I need to work around? If I'm going to be a chicken farmer, I know the standards that are required for normal, so that the chicken is able to produce and give me returns that I require. So that's the second level. The third level is then working with industry, because it's for the benefit of the industry to then have the right internal regulations or standards or policies that drive that business. And that's what we are looking at when we are launching the pecking report today. We are saying in Uganda, these companies are food companies, we can name them. What is their animal welfare policy? Do they just buy animals everywhere without looking at policy? Or do they go and evaluate? If I am a farmer and I want to supply to a supermarket in Uganda, does the supermarket go and review and find out whether I am meeting certain standards? Because if I'm not meeting certain standards, there's likelihood that whatever I'm producing and they are selling, they are processing and selling, if it's a pig or a chicken, could lead to problems with food security and food safety. That is what we are saying.
Most of food safety.
Yeah, most of food safety. And that's what we are saying as an organization, and that's why we started there. Last year, so that I just get over the report, last year we evaluated African companies, predominantly in Kenya, because of the fact that COVID restrictions and I think there was also other challenges that didn't allow us. So the report we are releasing today has some Ugandan brands that are in Kenya that we evaluated, has international brands like the big supermarket that's here, Carrefour, that we also evaluated, but that one was evaluated globally because it's not only in Africa, it's in North America, Brazil, etc., etc. So what we are going to be, then it has international brands, fast food restaurants like KFC, which is here, but is also a global brand. We want to see whether there are policies that they're using internationally also apply in these markets, or those policies are only for international markets, and here we do a totally different thing. If that's the case, then what is the safeguard to ensure that the Ugandan consumer is being treated like any other consumer globally? So that's what we are launching today. But this year, because we do this review every year, the pecking order, this is the 4th year, we do it every year. Later in the year, we'll be re-evaluating companies, and this time we're expanding it to the East African community. So we'll be looking at Tanzanian brands, Kenyan brands, and how they're operating, and Ugandan brands, and how they're operating across the 3 markets, the 3 big markets, maybe in Rwanda and Burundi, but predominantly in the 3 big countries. That is what we are looking at, and that's what we are launching today. Yeah.
Well, very interesting report. I can't wait to know the supermarket I go to, places we go to buy these products. Now, pecking order, that is chicken. How safe is that I'm taking home? Very interesting here is because when you talk about health, I must tell you, telling people that when you eat this cow, when you eat that and that, they may not be concerned so very much. When you talk about the farmer and show them how they are losing because of not following, you call them animal
welfare standards.
Welfare standards.
Yep.
Yes, the farmer could be touched to some extent. But if still, when he does his things, he'll still have market, then he may not be touched. But if we go to this end person, the market person, and says, these are my standards, and I love the fact that the report looked at that stage.
Yeah.
If I'm told for me to supply my meat to maybe some, I'll just have any supermarket name or cornerstone supermarket, that well, they'll look at how I've transported the meat, how I've killed, how this animal is killed. Then as a farmer, if they're giving me good money, I'll ensure all this is right.
Exactly.
Let me give you one example. I often go to meat packers to get food for my animals.
Yep.
But there's something I discovered that broke my heart there. That people in Uganda, and this is researched and confirmed, many of them, to make good money out of their cows, this is what they do. They wait for the cow to conceive. Usually when it conceives, it looks bigger.
Yeah.
They wait for this cow to conceive. When it's about 2-3 months, that's when they sell it to these people you saw bring them on the truck.
Okay.
Because then it looks bigger, it looks nice, and they can make good money out of it.
Yeah.
Now, these people will buy the cow, come and kill the cow, slaughter the cow, then this calf, developing calf, is removed and sold in a section called the dog section.
Oh, okay.
So for the dog people, you come and buy, it could be 4 months, it could be, but when they are formed,
Yeah.
so price varies. One that is about to give 6-8 will go for maybe 80,000, and that's what you buy. But I find that first I was like, but who is selling a cow that is going to give? Well, they told me, no, these are not stolen animals. It is a technique these farmers are using to get more money out of these cows. And really, I find that also very disturbing, more so when you look, because you're killing another for continuity purposes. And well, let me go for a break. I think I'll return after this break with my guest, who is Victor, and we'll be discussing more.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Pick of the day on UBC. Objective and non-partisan.
Honorable Minister, there were a number of points. I want to start with you.
Straight from the hearts of open-minded men and women.
Money tends to move faster at night. So when people are not counting,
Don't take it for granted.
Candid and authentic.
Because Uganda is not Thailand.
That's not correct, and we should stop that kind of mentality. So what I'm saying
That's
is,
a trick question. Don't answer.
I'm not getting into that. I'm not getting into that.
Tell him you speak low.
I think that's where we are beginning to have a problem.
Was brought to you by
Get away with MTN Momo Advance. Momo Advance tops up your Momo to complete your transactions. Dial *165*5*3# to apply. MTN Momo Advance is always available when you need it.
Jerry con. Jerry con. Hey, Master Blaster. Touch him, man. Buy Jerry con with muscle. Those ones who say go for you only. Mundava, best movies I teach you. When I go to the muscari, because of the cover that is very far. Is you serious? Is serious you? What? Yeah? You step it on it. Add kilometers to your legs, and you get your sugar. We buy meat from Umaru, and Umaru refuses to give you enough meat. Mama! Show him that they don't joke with you. Umaru, Jerry car.
Okukakaluka n'okulungi kwetaagako omuntu akuyambako, n'olwekyo tujja kukuteerawo embeera esaanidde osobole okukola ekisinga awamu teri kitulema.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome back from that break, and thank you so much for being with us here on UBC TV. I'm Robert Chirabo Nyonyintono with my guest, who is Victor Mayo, and he is from the World Animal Protection. Today they are launching, that is the 4th pecking order report. And this is all aimed at improving animal welfare, but also there's so many benefits we get if we do things right, or that they should be done. For the farmers, well, better yields, like he said. For us, the consumers, then also, it's more safe for us to consume. Now, Victor, you've launched a number of these reports, but what impact have they done? You know, we're in a world of conferences, reports, committees. In Uganda, I have committees, reports. But is there any impact, or is it something that's it's a culture itself of doing things?
Thank you, Robert. That's a good question. In reality, this is the fourth report you are launching. Last year, we launched the third one. And the interesting thing that happened when we launched the third pecking order, what we call TPO report, was that one of the big producers actually two of the big producers in Kenya have now developed an animal welfare policy. If you go to their website, you'll find the policy is there, very clearly stated. Beyond that, they have also made certain commitments that within a certain time span between now and 2030, there are certain things that they're going to do towards ensuring the animal welfare is meeting what we call farm animal responsible minimum standards. This is what then drives businesses, and I think you are right when you talked about business. The reason why the two corporates made that decision, the big pig farmer producer and the big chicken producer in Kenya, is because they realize that for you to get into high-value markets, the international supermarkets, the international fast food restaurants that are coming into our spaces, you need to have the audit you based on these policies and standards and commitments. So that was one. The second thing in Kenya, what has also happened is we have then developed what we are calling the Farm Animal Welfare Code of Practice. So that it drives business. This is something that Kenya Bureau of Standards working with industry has developed, and we are hoping that the same could happen here in Uganda, where Uganda Bureau of Standards with the industry can then develop a code of practice around animal welfare, which then drives how do we transport animals? How do we slaughter these animals? I know in Uganda there's a law, just like in Kenya, that talks about the slaughter process of an animal. How you do inspection, how do you slaughter, how do you stand these animals? These are things that are important for business.
Well, some here you just get an axe and hit it on the head.
Yeah, well, I know those are some of the things we do, but for us to then get into high-value business markets that are coming into these spaces that we are in, we need to meet certain international standards, and that's why our laws need to move. We need to implement the laws when we finally get them. And then we need to remember also that Uganda is part of East African Community, and it's also part of the Africa Free Trade Area. These treaties require certain minimum standards. Yes. And if these standards are not being met...
Actually, I remember about a year or back, government talked about, there was something they were pushing in the side of animals, knowing how you breed your animals.
Exactly.
And it sparked a lot of public rage here in my country, where people are like, but register my cows, then how I'll feed these cows, then all that.
You know, Robert, the reality is that in food systems, one of the things you're looking at is what you call traceability. I want to be able to know that the cow that I'm eating today was bred properly. It didn't have anything added to it. There were no antibiotics used in its growth. It is a safe product. And so globally in trade for livestock products, there's something now we are talking about traceability, where if I went to a supermarket like the one in Uganda and picked a piece of processed meat for that matter, and I looked at the barcode, the batch number, if I called the organization, they should be able to tell me this animal was fed with feed from this organization, which contained this, and the batch number of the feed was this, the maize came from here, so that holistically you're managing...
Exactly what you're discussing now is what our government was pushing for. Because and I think it was not appreciated.
And that's why we need to do a lot of sensitization for people to appreciate where we are coming from. It also manages some of the things that we've been seeing, cattle rustling, because then we're able to trace that that animal was not stolen from somewhere. It's an animal that has come through a production system. It has been fed the proper way. It has been given the proper vaccinations, so that you're managing risk and disease. Remember that I said that 70% of diseases are coming from animals.
Yes.
If we don't manage that risk and ensure that we follow certain things, then we are prone to a situation where we'll end up with diseases that we can't manage. And that then gives us a challenge with our budgets in health systems. And those are some of the things that then we are looking at. So holistically and globally, when you start looking at livestock production systems, there are certain things that we are required to do. in the global setting. We are required to slaughter animals in a particular way, stand them, ensure that they are not being slaughtered, as you said, with an axe that then causes more damage. Because one, if the animal is not slaughtered when it's comfortable and relaxed, you end up with a poor quality product. The meat is hard because there's adrenaline. The animal has suffered, so you end up with tougher meat, which then brings poor products, and that product doesn't last for long. The capacity to keep is not that good, which then the shelf life is less, which then leads to issues with food security, because then you don't have enough, because you are ending up with a poor quality product that doesn't last longer. Then the second thing is the food safety aspects of it. If it's not done properly, you can have contamination coming into the food. The animal was slaughtered properly, but because we are not meeting standards in the process of eviscerating, removing the intestines, or in the process of cutting it into parts, we then contaminate the animal. And that then brings food poisoning, which then also causes problems globally. So that's the reason why certain standards are being created, and that's why there's even in regional treaties we then start talking about, for instance, in East Africa there's a phyto and sanitary mandates, which is essentially to say there's a way that we must manage the animal so that disease does not go through. I don't want, as a country, we don't want to import things from Kenya into Uganda, which then brings problems to Ugandans. Same, we don't want to transport anything from Uganda, whether it's milk or into Tanzania or elsewhere, that brings problems. And that's why that monitoring system becomes critical. Big organizations then are even going to the level where they do audits. I have been involved in where certain brands have said, we want to buy chicken from Robert. Can you go and see what Robert's farm is? Is it well fenced? Does it have good biosecurity? Is he feeding the animals well with good quality feeds? Is the water quality? So you analyze all these things, feed quality, water quality. Is he doing disease control? We look at your vaccination programs and all those things. If you don't do any of these things, you miss the opportunity to go to supply in a high
Victor,
market.
guess what? When you're telling me, you know, we are craving so much as a country to improve our exports. We feel we should be Africa's food basket and the world as Uganda. We are blessed, you've been around. Fertile soils, everything looks so good. But now when you begin talking about the standards, I see there's so much we must do within a very short time.
Exactly.
Otherwise, most of these, we are yet to see more of our consignments being rejected because of such practices. Now, going back to the report, in the interest of time, where is the launch? Who attended? Is it virtual? Is it who are expected to be there?
Okay, the launch is happening at a hotel just down the road, Africana, and essentially it's a media event. So media will be there. We are hoping that way we'd be able to get the word as far out as possible. But we've also invited the companies, the food companies that we are targeting, so that they participate in the process, they understand what we are trying to do, and see how we can work with them. Because as an organization, we don't want to just create a problem, but we also want to work with you. So just like we've worked with Kenyan and some of the South African brands to develop some of these standards, we are willing and available. So if there's a food company, whether it's a supermarket, whether it's a producer, whether it's a processor, and they want to engage us, we are available to work with them, tell them these are the kind of standards. We can also do audits to then tell you these are where the gaps are. So if your target is to supply to this big supermarket, maybe you need to change 1, 2, 3 so that we improve those standards. But we're also working with them to develop both the internal policies and standards that are part of their buying process or supply chain processes. But we're also working with governments. We have engaged the Veterinary Association here, Uganda Veterinary Association. We've also talked to the ministry, because it's not just about industry, it's also about the regulator having the right standards in place and implementing them. And so we are able to then say, you are, like a good example, we talked about the Prevention of Cruelty Act, the Cap 220, which is old, just like the Kenyan one. It needs to be revised. What are the things that we need to be looking at, and where is the world looking at in terms of revising? What regulations or guidelines do we need to have for either produced by Uganda Bureau of Standards or by industry that then drives this business to ensure that food safety goes up, but food security also goes up. So essentially that's what we're doing.
Now, as an organization, do you have set time or that we buy this? Because, for example, for us as Uganda have our vision 2040, we know where we want Uganda to be. Whether we shall get there in time, but at least we have a set deadline. For us to see that animal rights are respected, for us to know that we can benefit, because for me I'm looking at it in 3 ways. One, health factor, which is very important for the consumers, more so when you look at the meat we eat, how it's transported, the adrenaline that flows in there. I think, I don't know other countries so much, but the rate of food we eat. When it comes to antibiotics, farmers in Uganda, antibiotics are mandatory.
That's
in poultry, in cattle, and they even know, they will tell you, have pain and strip, have this, have that, and it's all about self-medication. You know, it's about you, everyone is a vet. A person who has stayed long in cattle, they know how to treat those basics. So there's so much, and we don't follow these because there's even a period, don't eat this.
Withdrawal periods.
Withdrawal period. For us, we don't. In Uganda, second, a sick animal is not left that way.
You take it to the slaughterhouse.
We don't bury them, I don't know. We don't band them. Someone has swine fever, and if you have 40 pigs, now you wake up, 5 have gone.
You quickly kill the other.
You quickly call, come and, even these ones, I know they are sick, but before they can lose weight, please take them and kill them. A cow doesn't fall sick and you dig a hole to bury it. We eat that. And people will tell you, so-and-so's cow, I've seen animals electrocuted. And that meat, we rush for it. So that has health impact. But then also the other aspect is for the farmer. If you do these things well, you get better yields, you get that is good. Then also, my only worry now is, we're in the East African community, and you've rightly said it. Kenya may be moving faster than us in respecting this. And this will leave us either out of market if we don't improve. So what is the deadline that you anticipate all the East African communities to be at par and be able to compete relatively in the continental free zone? Globally, these companies also want to supply them with our meat. We have so much.
I think that's a good question, and I think the important thing we need to agree is that countries will be at different stages, irrespective of the treaties they are in, the Africa Free Trade Area, or whether the East African Community, or whatever we are in. So that's one that I leave to the politicians and the policy makers to decide, because each country then has the relevant delegates that represent them. For me, the interesting one is the deadlines around farm animal welfare standards that has been set globally. We are in a third world country, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania for that matter. And if you look at what has been happening globally, especially in food systems, there are certain deadlines that we're beginning to look at. I'll give you a good example. We Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania still produce eggs from what we'd call battery cage systems. You buy a system where chickens are in small cages. Those cages are coming from the developed world, which is now rejecting them. And in fact, in the developed world, by around this time, they had said they would no longer have eggs coming from that production system. But they're very interesting. They are sending those cages to Africa with certain funding facilities that then the Africa farmer adopts.
And it's the modern way of doing things now here in Uganda.
In Uganda and Kenya.
And Kenya as well, yes. You have
the worrying thing is that globally we are saying, and I'll give you a good example which you can quote. Carrefour, the big supermarket that is now just down the road, has said by 2026 they will not be accepting eggs from that production system. But globally, Africa has been given, and the developed world, Asia and Africa, have been given up to 2030 to phase out that production system. So you see, while we are thinking it's the best thing to do, the world is moving away. The brands are sitting here. So the risk is that in another 5 years, we might have a production system that we think is good, but it's not able to supply to the big high-value markets. So what happens to the high-value markets? We'll get products coming from elsewhere. Because if that big supermarket says today we are going to apply our international standards in Uganda, what happens? the Ugandans can't supply, so they must import eggs from somewhere. And that's the risk that we're saying. Animal welfare is no longer just about animals. It's about animals. It's about human health. It's about trade. Yeah? And those are the things that why we are now saying, let's come together as industry and say, how do we manage egg production in Uganda so that when Carrefour says we want X number of trays of eggs from this kind of production system, we can give them.
Actually, I'm very shocked because that is something we are looking at as modern. Yeah. Though I must say, much as it looks nice, seeing these sleeping in flats, you also see the animal, how it's very
congested, worried, stressed. Because
stressed, it can't move, it can't
do anything.
It can't do anything, it's just getting water. And most of our poultry farmers, now they have these. So Ugandan poultry farmers, this is not a system that will last for a long time.
The world is,
the world is running away.
This is a challenge, I say, you know, we need to, as farmers, we need to look at what is happening elsewhere and where these standards are coming from. Because when you see some of these big international brands coming into our backyards, they're looking for markets. And when they're looking for markets, they have certain standards that they want to apply. The question is, are we able to meet those standards? If we are not, then essentially what we are saying is that we will be consuming, in a little while, we'll be consuming products from elsewhere. And that is part of the reason why we are saying, as an organization...
You go to Carrefour, Uganda, and the eggs you're taking are not from Uganda.
Exactly.
These guys bring pesticides and all that, then they say they want organically grown
animals or products. So that's the important thing. But for me, the critical and the important one is the health aspects. We are talking about the right to health, people consuming healthy products that has no impact on their health, and managing our health system. If we cannot manage the food that we eat, and we cannot manage the medication, and I think it was very good you talked about the capacity of the farmer to buy reserve drugs, because those are the drugs that we use for human medicine. So if you're already consuming it in our products, milk, meat, even in crops, then where are we going to? 10, 15 years down the line, we might not have any medication. And that's why the law says, I'm sure the same law applies here, that antibiotics are prescription-only drugs. But because we are not implementing that law, we have allowed everybody to sell antibiotics. And that is going to cost us a lot, because, and I've seen it in Kenya and other places where somebody gets sick, you isolate an organism, and it is resistant to all the known antibiotics. So what do you do with such a person? Isn't that a death sentence?
It's a death sentence.
And that death sentence is coming from what? Our production system, the food that we are eating, because we are eating antibiotics in that production system. If, and the big organization, the two, you said what came out of the launching, if you look at the production systems of the two organizations that we've worked with to develop those standards in Kenya, they have been able to produce pigs and chickens without antibiotics, give the animal good quality feed, good quality water, a good environment, and ensure that you vaccinate against any known diseases. If you do that, and with good management, you don't need antibiotics. In fact, the cost of antibiotics eats into the farmer's profits. So if you do the right thing, you don't even need antibiotics.
You just maximize profits.
Exactly.
Because you're not spending on treatment. Well, time is just enough. It depends on how you use it.
Exactly.
So I'm giving you 1 minute to have your final remarks.
I think for me, animal welfare has moved away from being an animal-related matter to a matter that is so important because it has impact on human health, it has impact on trade, it has impact on even climate change. And that's why the world is beginning to say, can we relook at how we manage animals? And I want to conclude by a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, who said that you can tell the level of development of a nation by looking at how they manage animals. And if our animal welfare in Uganda is where it is, the question I would like to pose to Ugandans is Uganda a great nation? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Victor Mayo, who happens to be the farm campaign manager at the World Animal Protection. Today they'll be launching the 4th That is Pecking Order Report at Hotel Africana, and the media, of course, will be there to let us know more regarding animal welfare, its impact on our health, its impact on production, and of course, its impact in trade, because now there are standards that we must have. Robert Chirabo, wishing you a lovely day. Let's remain law-abiding, and of course, let's love one another. Let's share the little we have. We are in this period as we approach Easter. God bless you. See you tomorrow, God willing.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala.